Hi everyone, it's Katrina. From red-haired mummies in China to ancient Egyptians in the Americas, here are 9 discoveries that could change history. Number 9. Tarim red-haired mummies. Northwestern China's Tarim Basin is known for both its rich history and amazing diversity. But perhaps one of the things that stands out the most are the red-haired Chinese mummies that have been found here, perfectly preserved. The mummies were first discovered in the 1930s by Swedish archaeologists, and then again in 2000, the Xinjiang Archaeological Institute discovered the oldest and best preserved to date. One of the most famous mummies is the Beauty of Lao Lan. She was found in 1980, buried 3 feet beneath the ground. The salt in the soil helped keep her extremely well preserved, and she was wrapped in a woolen cloth with many funerary gifts. Bordering several countries and located along the historic Silk Road trade route, people have passed through the region for thousands of years. But the roots of the Tarim Basin's residents have long been a mystery. Where did they come from? Scientists are finally close to getting answers, thanks to a recent DNA analysis of the mummified remains that date back nearly 4,000 years. The 20 mummies that were tested were found at the edge of the basin at the Qiaohe Tomb Complex and were found among the earliest layer of burials. The DNA shows that the people descended from South Siberia and Western Eurasia. The DNA also showed that they had genetic mutations that are either rare or not known to happen among modern people. The researchers concluded that these red-haired Chinese mummies may have had close relations with Western Europe via their maternal ancestry. They also believe that the people buried at the site descended from Siberian and Mongolian populations that intermingled thousands of years earlier. Besides the mysterious mummies, archaeologists found many artifacts of human figurines, boat coffins, leather hides, and perhaps most memorable, phallus and vulva-shaped carvings. The site of the Tarim Basin spans a millennium, making it an ideal place to search for answers to our human past and the mystery of the ancient people who lived here. Number 8. Father Nazario's stones. Back in the late 19th century, a priest discovered a collection of fist-sized rocks bearing cryptic inscriptions in Puerto Rico. He was convinced that the artifacts were evidence of one of the lost tribes of Israel, but everyone else dismissed them as a hoax, just made to dupe tourists or artifact collectors. For almost 100 years, the rocks sat ignored until 2001, when archaeologist Reniel Rodriguez Ramos stumbled upon them and decided to take a closer look. He recalled that the rocks were considered worthless, with one even being used as a doorstop. They got no love at all. Now known as Father Nazario stones, the rocks have gotten much more attention. Researchers are reportedly becoming increasingly convinced that they are authentic and that they represent a lost language from pre-Columbian Puerto Rico. There are figures carved onto the surface of the stones. Rodriguez pointed out that one of the rocks seems to feature an image of a man wearing a turban. Altogether, there are over 300 stones, and they contain at least 20 repetitive symbols that he has identified. Yet the island's original inhabitants, the Taínos, left behind no known evidence of a written language. The research team has narrowed it down to some sort of system of annotation and not decoration, but they have no idea what it means. Nothing like this has ever been found in the Americas, and depending on what the symbols mean or where they came from, it could rewrite the region's history. Number 7. Chinese artifact in North America. In July 2014, an amateur artifact hunter discovered a partially exposed sword on the banks of a stream in the U.S. state of Georgia. But it wasn't just any sword, it was a Chinese sword. It has a strange shape and is carved with many symbols and designs that we still don't really understand. It's among the latest alleged out-of-place Chinese artifacts that have turned up in recent years in North America. The 12-inch long weapon was provisionally identified as being made from a rare mineral called lizardite, which is found in both the northern and southern hemispheres. But more tests are admittedly necessary to determine the material's type and origin. The sword is reportedly the only artifact of its type ever found in North America. Some people are starting to believe that perhaps the ancient Chinese also made it to the Americas long before Columbus. There is a dragon figure on the top of the blade which was typical of the Shang dynasty and a feathered crown. It bears some similarities to the Mesoamerican jaguar god, indicating maybe there was a connection between the Chinese and the Olmecs. There are some similarities between Chinese and Olmec symbolism and mythology. and this contentious debate has perplexed researchers for over a century. Did they ever actually meet, or are these types of similarities just a coincidence, a common human experience? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And now for number 6. But first, want to give a big shout out to Miss Sin85. I hope you're having a wonderful night, and to Jason Zorn. Cheers to both of you, and thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos on archaeology and amazing discoveries. Number 6. Stolen Viking treasure. In 2015, metal detectorist George Powell and Leighton Davies dug up a hoard of Viking treasure in Herefordshire in England. But all did not go as planned because the land was owned by Lord Colley, who did not give the pair permission to dig. Whoops! The artifacts included gold jewelry, silver ingots, and around 300 Anglo-Saxon coins, which experts believe were buried by a Viking warrior over 1,000 years ago. Included among the jewelry was a ring, an arm bracelet, and a small crystal ball pendant dating back between the 5th and 9th centuries. Powell and Davies decided to keep it quiet and did not report the multi-million-dollar find as the law requires, and instead began trying to sell it to antique dealers. Much to the frustration of historians, authorities were unable to recover most of the coins, and the dynamic duo got into big trouble. The artifacts that have been recovered offer unprecedented insight into life during the time of King Alfred the Great, which was defined by a 9th century power struggle that experts know little about. For example, rumor has it that 2 of the lost coins depict the leaders King Alfred the Great of Wessex and Ceolwulf II of Mercia, pointing toward a previously unknown alliance between the two. Were they friends? Probably not, but at some point they were getting along. Authorities continue to hold out hope that some of the missing artifacts will be returned, but that might never happen, and they have no choice but to accept this possible reality. Meanwhile, Powell is serving 10 years in prison for his crime, while Davies is spending 8.5 years behind bars. Worth it? I don't think so. Number 5. Cat domestication. The domestication of the modern house cat is a little understood phenomenon. When did cats start becoming pets? I mean, some would argue that even today, cats are elusive and mysterious creatures. A 2013 study traced the first known instance of a mutual relationship between humans and cats to an ancient agricultural Chinese settlement called Quanhukun. This farming village 5,300 years ago attracted all kinds of rodents, which in turn attracted cats, who could eat to their heart's content. They started hanging around people, and the rest is history. Hanging around humans was highly beneficial for them, and you know how cats are. But farmers also benefited from the cats, who served as a de facto form of pest control. Evidence suggests that people and cats became closer over time. For example, the remains of an elderly cat found in the ancient village show that the animal was well cared for. Another feline bore evidence of eating millet, indicating that someone fed the cat. It's also possible that the cat scavenged, but the findings show that humans and felines spent considerable time in close proximity to one another either way. These interactions do not mean that cats were domesticated. Instead, they show that felines began to live peacefully among humans and at some point began benefiting from us, leading to their eventual domestication. Scientists are still admittedly trying to trace the origin of modern domestic cats, which they believe descended from African wildcats as far back as 8000 BC during the Neolithic period. Much of this is speculative, since the earliest known evidence of cat domestication dates back to around 4,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. For now, researchers are still working to find the missing pieces of this puzzle. Number 4. New hominid species. The history of the human species and our closest relatives is confusing at best, and researchers are continuously working to try to piece everything together, and new discoveries sometimes raise more questions than answers. In 2013, volunteers found a collection of hominid remains deep within a cave in Johannesburg, South Africa. They recovered over 1,400 fossilized bone fragments and 140 teeth, constituting the single richest fossil deposit of its kind throughout Africa. And, much to the team's surprise, the remains included evidence of a previously unidentified extinct species from the Homo genus. Dubbed Homo naledi, the prehistoric primate had a small brain and an ape-like torso and shoulders. Dating back between 335,000 and 236,000 years, The bones also contain evidence of numerous human-like features, and the species may have lived alongside the earliest modern humans. It's clear that H. naledi and Homo sapiens, aka us humans, are related, but the question of how they're related remains unanswered, and experts are unsure where the newly discovered species is situated on the hominid family tree. The discovery's most baffling aspect stems from the realization that the H. naledi bones appear to have been deliberately left in the cave. This behavior has not been observed in other equally primitive hominids. It seems that they may have had some sort of primitive ritual or burial practice, or maybe they lived in caves before others did. It was so long ago, it's a miracle there are even any bone fragments left. Number 3. Who built the Great Pyramids of Giza? Legend holds that the Great Pyramids of Giza were built by slaves, but a cluster of 4,000-year-old burials located nearby suggests that the iconic structures were actually built by paid laborers. Located 9 feet underground, the mud brick tombs contain the well-preserved remains of roughly a dozen individuals, who experts believe helped build the ancient monuments. The deceased were laid to rest with jars of beer and bread for use in the afterlife. The graves were discovered near other pyramid builders' burials, which were first found in 1990, thanks to a vigilant tourist. These discoveries offer valuable insight into the lifestyle and origins of the people who built the Great Pyramids. They also show that pyramid builders were paid for their labor, and that they were not forced to work, according to Egypt's chief archaeologist, Zahi Hawass. The misconception that pyramid builders were slaves may have started with the Book of Exodus, which claims that Egyptians enslaved the Israelites. A former Israeli prime minister in 1977 claimed that Jews built the pyramids, adding to the myth. The story perpetuated from there, thanks largely to Hollywood. The builders were admittedly poor, and their skeletons bear obvious signs of arthritis and other health problems, but they were also respected for their labor. They worked in 3-month rotations and regularly ate meat, with the estimated workforce of 10,000 people consuming around 21 cattle and 23 sheep daily. They ate meat much more often than the average population. Workers who died during construction were buried near the pyramids, which were considered sacred property of the pharaohs. Although no gold or other valuables were found within the tombs, their proximity to the pyramids speaks to their importance. Hawass said that the individuals would have never been buried the way that they were if they had been slaves. Number 2. The Library of Alexandria. Speaking of ancient Egypt, the burning of the Great Library at Alexandria is largely considered one of history's worst travesties. Founded in 283 BC, it was once the ancient world's largest library, housing over 100 scholars, as well as texts written by historically famous thinkers like Homer, Plato, and Socrates. Despite its renowned reputation, the library did not admit visitors based on wealth. Instead, it was open to anyone who proved to be a worthy scholar. Legend holds that the Great Library was tragically burned to the ground in a single event, but evidence suggests that the library's decline and the destruction of hundreds of thousands of its manuscripts was much more gradual, and that, same as today, money issues played a major role. The first fire at the Great Library allegedly happened around 40 AD, when Julius Caesar and his invading forces set it on fire. This marked the first in a series of destructive battles and blazes that happened over the following centuries. Government spending cuts and other policy changes played a major role in tipping the library into non-existence. Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius effectively shut the establishment down when he revoked resident scholars' pay and banned foreign scholars from visiting. From there, the library's precious contents were neglected and forgotten. In 391 AD and 415 AD, religious riots further damaged the facility. The library met its end in the year 640 when it was captured by Arab forces, who reportedly gathered the remaining manuscripts and used them as fuel for bathhouses, completing the destruction. Number 1. African artifacts in South America. Some scholars believe that there is evidence of African people making contact with people in South America, once again long before Christopher Columbus sailed to the New World in 1492. One theory describes how King Abukari II headed a voyage from modern-day Mali to South America around 1300, but some believe that Africans reached the continent much earlier. Writing for Face to Face Africa in 2018, Nduta Waweru claimed that archaeologists have discovered artifacts in South America suggesting that Africans lived there as far back as sometime between 13,000 BC and 600 AD. Evidence suggests that people from Axum, Meroe, and the land of Punt settled in South America during that time period, according to Waweru, who said that African skulls have been found in Ecuador, Chile, and Peru. There are alleged similarities between African and South American religions that may point toward the possibility of pre-Columbian contact, including images of South American deities that resemble African people. There are also correlations between early medical practices found on both continents, such as trepanning, which involved drilling holes in the skull. Archaeologists have reportedly found pots and water jars from the land of Punt, and Columbus himself supposedly described the people he encountered as black-skinned and having arrived from the south and southeast in trading ships that dealt in gold-tipped spears. These claims are widely rejected by mainstream experts, and they're admittedly far from proven. But as the narrative of who arrived in the Americas first, after Native Americans, constantly changes and is held up to increasingly credible scrutiny, more people are opening their minds to this possibility. There are also theories that people from other places, such as China, like I mentioned before, as well as Sumerians or other European people, beat Columbus to the Americas. And researchers have already more or less proven that the Vikings set foot in North America long before Columbus arrived. Thanks for watching! If you'd like to learn about more discoveries that could rewrite history, let me know in the comments below. And be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. See you next time! Bye!